Still trying to herd all those ducks into a nice neat row before you get started with your business or project? Maybe you've already started, but your fear is stopping you from up-leveling. Or maybe you've spent your life saying yes to everyone else, but committing to yourself is still on your to-do list. Hi, I'm Claire Barton, and I'm a recovering perfectionist too. Welcome to the show where I share simple, practical, and mindset tips to get you doing work you're passionate about, making the money you want, and spending your time and energy building your dream lifestyle. Hey, recovering perfectionists, it's Claire here, and welcome to today's episode where I'm speaking with the very talented and amazing Michelle Whitehead. How are you going, Michelle?
I am wonderful, Claire. It's so good to be here with you today.
So good to have a chat. Michelle and I have done a heap of work on both sides of our business, actually. You've helped me out with a heap of my legal stuff, and I've helped you out with a heap of your organisation stuff. And
Absolutely.
We've had a lot to do with each other. So for anyone who doesn't know Michelle, she is an Australian lawyer and mediator to creative, intelligent entrepreneurs, which is probably the best title I've ever heard in my life. And in my humble opinion, very, very apt and fitting. So welcome to the Recovering Perfectionist. It's awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're so welcome. So I will hand over to you just to give us a bit of an introduction to you and who you are and what your biz does and what your biz journey's been like so far before we jump into our chat about boundaries and legal stuff in your business and how that works for our beautiful recovering perfectionists.
Awesome. Okay. So basically I started out wanting to be a creative author and poet, and ended up channeling my energies into law school when people said I couldn't make a living with my honours in English degree. So I did that for a while, and I basically worked in a small town law firm where I was the dog's body who did everything that anybody else didn't want to do, anything that wasn't family law or criminal law, which basically meant all the small business law, the stuff with lots of boxes, the tangled up disputes, all of that sort of stuff. And after about 4 or 5 years of that, I started to get very disheartened and thought that I would go and qualify as a mediator so that I could leave the law behind. And once I'd done my master's in law and gotten my mediation qualifications, I suddenly realised that I had no idea how to market a business of my own. So I started joining online entrepreneur type communities, intending that I would learn how to market my mediation business. I would become a full-time mediator and leave the law behind forever, which is when I started to discover this amazing, incredible, connected community of women mainly, but passion-based people who were so keen on their businesses and who was so building businesses that were just lighting them up. And the thing that most of them had in common was that they didn't have the solid foundations that law and risk management and all of that sort of strategic basic stuff can give you. And so I started realizing that they needed me more than I needed to quit law. So I forgave myself for becoming a lawyer and began building myself to become the type of lawyer that I had always wanted to be. I created ways to empower people to create their own legal documents, contracts that care, using the same love language and language of connection that they use in their marketing, that would really create containers for business relationships to flourish rather than having contracts that felt like icky, uncomfortable barbed wire fences. And I started looking at ways to get really holistic with our boundaries and put boundaries in place that allowed us to be of service without sacrificing ourselves. And my most recent project is working out ways to bring forward the traditional corporate risk management and good governance concepts, but not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Like, there's some stuff in there that's really, really useful for us in the online entrepreneurial world if you can reverse engineer it and translate it into something that's based on love and connection rather than fear and avoidance. So
Makes me want to exhale because you make it sound so easy and so obvious. But, you know, you and I have had this conversation before that I feel exactly the same when I sort of came into a lot of these online communities that were full of beautiful heart-centered women who had these businesses. And I was a bit the same. Like, I just sort of thought that the stuff that I did in terms of business management and organization and marketing and that sort of thing was kind of obvious. But then I realized that that was only because it was my zone of genius and not everyone else's. And when you can sort of see that there's stuff that you can bring, and when you can find a way of bringing the good stuff, like the good chunky strategy and infrastructure and structure from, you know, good corporate, I don't know, structure, keep overusing that word, but actually make it your own and make it the right language for you and your people, and make it, you know, take the good bits and leave the bad stuff sort of thing. It's the only way of doing it, really. So I just feel like it's such a breath of fresh air to have people like you who are in the legal world, which most of us feel completely shit scared about when we hear the word lawyer or accountant or, you know, all of those sort of things, because we just think we don't speak that language, it's too hard basket. But then along comes Michelle and makes it all easy and beautiful and heart-centered for us. So thank you.
And it's awesome for me too, because then I get to be the lawyer who works in fairyland, surrounded by crystals and fun. And
right. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's absolutely awesome.
Beautiful. So, Michelle, you mentioned before that, you know, one of the most important things is having boundaries. And I am absolutely talking about this at the moment in big ways. And I feel like the last couple of years, but especially the last kind of 6 months for me, has been a really big exercise in holding my boundaries. So the last few years I've kind of been working out what they are and what I do want to say yes to and what I want to say no to. And the last few months I've actually had to kind of hold myself accountable to actually say yes or no to those things. And it's really uncomfortable, but it's not as uncomfortable as it used to be. So tell us about boundaries, you know, as how you talk about it and how you teach your clients and your tribe about boundaries.
So one of the most important things I find with boundaries is that they need to be internally aligned. If your boundaries aren't a perfect match for your values, who you are and what you believe in, and your vision, where your business is going, then you're never going to stick to them. You're never going to apply them. You're just going to trample them all the time. And as part of that, I believe that boundaries need to be approached from a holistic perspective. So when I talk about boundaries, for example, saying no, as you said, I try and guide people to look at how they affect you, not just on the business level, but how they affect you mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, all of the whole gamut of, personally, spiritually, how all of the holistic way that boundaries, just to take that holistic approach and get that understanding that your boundaries need to be aligned and integrated with every aspect of who you are. So that's the first thing, they need to be internally aligned. And the second thing, as you said, they need to be externally applied. So a boundary is no good if nobody knows about it, and it's no good if it's not applied consistently. So, but that doesn't mean that boundaries should be rigid. So boundaries when your boundary is fully internally aligned and you are in the practice of applying it consistently, so that every time a situation pops up, you match it against your boundaries and you make a decision based on having that conscious knowledge of where your boundaries are, then that gives you the confidence and the ability to assess new situations as they arise and say, this is a place where my boundaries are being pushed. It's a novel situation, one I haven't come up against before. In this case, I'm prepared, and because I've got that holistic idea, I can see that in this case, if I acted outside my boundary, I would be stretching, say, for example, in the area of financial boundaries in order to feed myself in the area of spiritual or personal or physical. You can start to see how your boundaries play off against each other. And you can start to get that sort of flexible give and take boundary happening rather than having that brick wall that says, yes and no.
Yes.
Boundaries need to be really considered as fuzzy logic rather than, straight up.
Rigid barbed wire.
Rigid barbed wire, absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. If I can just go back to the internally aligned thing, because I think that's probably the biggest space that's kind of missing. And I know for me, and I talk a lot about, a lot of us came out of corporate, or we came out of jobs, and we wanted freedom, and we wanted flexibility, and we wanted whatever we wanted. But then within the first couple of months of starting our business, we've accidentally reestablished boundaries that our boss gave us when we were in our last job, such as what time we start, what time we go on lunch, what time we clock off, how much work we have to stay, how much work we take home, what you wear, all of that sort of thing. And so we accidentally kind of give ourselves these boundaries, and it's not until someone points it out, or maybe not ever, and it's not a bad thing. Like, if that's your boundary, you really want to get
absolutely,
and be sitting at your desk in your kitchen table by 9 o'clock, knock your socks off. But
understanding and just assessing, is this boundary, where did this boundary come from? Is it externally imposed, or is it something I actually believe in?
Yeah.
And is it something I'm prepared to stand behind? Does it feel right to me? I mean, a good example of this from a legal perspective is people think, oh, I'm supposed to say no refunds. I'm supposed to have this policy that I don't give any refunds. But at the same time, their values and their connection and their caring for their client means that as soon as someone asks for a refund, their initial impulse is to say, yes, sure, here's your money back. How can I make this better for you? And so they've got that misalignment. They've got that gap between what they think they should be doing and what their internal values and vision want them to be doing, so that they're always feeling guilty because they're always trampling over what they think their boundaries should be. Whereas when they actually give themselves permission to step fully into, this is who I am, I'm actually a caring person who believes that in most cases refunds should happen, but I don't want to be trampled all over, and I don't want to be a bitch about this, so how can I make this happen? And then you start thinking, okay, so where can I put that line? Can I say, yes, you can have a refund if you tell me you're not happy within 7 days or 24 hours or whatever else? And you start to put a more flexible boundary, and you think, okay, there are situations where I'll even step outside that boundary. So, for example, they were supposed to give me 24 hours notice, but their kid's been in hospital, and I can stretch my boundary there, or whatever else, and make allowances.
And so tell me, and I think when it comes to the refund thing, especially, you and I have talked about this, that I sat on my hands for about 6 months because I got to the bit where I needed to make a decision on my refund policy, and I just couldn't quite decide, because I was a bit like you said, I initially would be like mortified if someone wanted a refund, and I would do anything that I could to make it better, whether that was adding more value or giving them the money back, or I don't know, sending them a puppy. I don't know, like I would have done anything sort of thing. But also being like, well, no, I do need to have boundaries, and I don't want people to take the piss, and I don't want to be trampled over, like you said. But it wasn't until someone actually asked me for a refund, and it was like $50. It wasn't anything major, but it shook me, and it really forced me to go, okay, how do I actually feel? And what's the whole story leading up to this? And what do I wish I had in place to be able to enforce? So, how it played out and what my actual policy is now are very different things, which is fine.
Part of that,
but I kind of needed to get to that point of going, okay, now I need to make a decision, because there's a real life example of it going on.
And part of that paralysis comes from the perfectionism. Like I can't put a boundary in place because it needs to be the perfect boundary.
Right, exactly.
And no, boundaries
apply to everyone and everything.
Yeah, it has to be all encompassing and omniscient, this beautiful boundary of mine. And that's where I come from with brave boundaries, because brave boundaries are something that you revisit over and over again. They're not set in stone. They're something that every time, that you actually make dates with yourself to come in and think, okay, let's have a look at my boundaries. Where is the boundary between myself and my business not in alignment? Where is that separation? Where am I sacrificing myself instead of being of service?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And I think there's, you've talked about the internally aligned and being externally applied, and there's so many risks if you haven't quite if your boundaries
are someone else's and they're actually not internally aligned, and you keep changing them and you keep bending over backwards, or you keep whatever, it's actually not, not great for you, but it's also not great for building trust with your tribe as well, because they're reading one thing but then another thing's happening, and it's kind of like, this is a photo on Facebook, but this is what I look like in real life. It's like
exactly
people sort of thing, right? It just breaks. Breaks
and then you get to the point where people talk to each other, or someone makes a comment on Facebook and someone else says, "Hey, but she didn't do that with me," and and you get that whole lack of authenticity, that whole wishy-washy. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing here?
Yeah.
Whereas your boundaries give you that groundedness, that really solid foundation of, this is who I am, this is what I'm here, and this is my service.
Yeah.
And it's a service to me as well as a service to the world. Yeah. And it's taking responsibility, it's taking ownership for who you are and where you're going to stand in this world. And that's such a massive part of this new paradigm of business that we're in.
Yeah, it really is.
That being prepared to stand and be yourself.
Yeah, I talk often about the courage of your convictions. So if you've got a belief, if you've got a value, if you've got a boundary, that unfortunately it is going to piss some people off eventually, and some people aren't going to like it, and hate is going to hate, and all of that sort of thing. But and it's one of the hardest things to do. But also, once you've done it once, like the first time you do it is always going to be the hardest. So you've done the thing and you've said no, and someone didn't like it, and the world kept spinning. And the quicker you can realize that, it's like all things with making mistakes or failing fast or whatever, the quicker you can do it and go, oh, that was crap, but life goes on, no one died, we're all good. Next time you need to say no or stick to your thing or have the courage of your convictions or whatever is always going to be easier. So there's lots of, that goes into a whole other mindset sort of thing about the authenticity and sticking to your guns and whatnot. So
and to bring in a whole other can of worms, the thing I've been noticing more and more often is how this works on an energetic level.
Yes.
Because I'll have people come to me and say, oh, my boundaries, people are testing, I'm getting so many clients who are not who I want to do. And we strengthen their boundaries, we put their boundaries in place, and all of a sudden, just having those boundaries there and having them strengthened, they're suddenly calling in their ideal clients, and they're getting less tested.
Right.
Because it's almost as if something out there knows that there's no need to test those boundaries anymore because they're strong.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, very good.
So it actually reduces the amount of conflict out there, which is wonderful.
Which is perfect.
Yeah.
So apart from things like refund policies, what sort of boundaries do you think are really important for women in business or people who have the recovering perfectionist traits of procrastinating and fear and not sure if we're going to get it right or not sure what the end product looks like? What other sort of boundaries or activities do you kind of work with your clients for them to be able to understand what their boundaries are and then to be able to put them in place?
It's interesting actually, because as a massive procrastinator and recovering perfectionist myself, I'm the type who will vanish for 2 weeks because I just disappear into a novel series and then another novel series and then another novel series. And the thing to remember is that this isn't an exercise in perfectionism, and that you just keep coming back and coming back, rebooting, resetting, all of those sorts of things. But getting clear around what your boundaries are with time management, saying yes, money, all of that. I created a Brave Boundaries course last quarter, which was an email course, and we had 16 boundaries that we covered. And in each of them, we looked into them. From each of those, I had 7 aspects, as I said before, the mental, physical, all of that. But we looked into it from each of those boundaries we broke down and holistically entered into. But from a practical...
We'll share the link to that if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
In the show notes if anyone wants to have a look at that. That sounds like a really beautiful process to go through. Like it's all right to say, what are your boundaries? Sit down and journal about them, but actually going through a process to...
Yeah, and it's delivered as like a daily email. So it's just an evergreen sort of roll out, work through at your own pace type of thing.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
But from a practical perspective, I think in terms of future-proofing your business, which is what I'm all on about at the moment, and actually getting up close and personal with who you want to be as a boss, and taking ownership and responsibility for your business, understanding the regulatory system in which you operate is an important part of your boundaries. Knowing that your business doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's a complex, interconnected web of relationships and influences that can impact on you. Understanding what best practice means for your business, even if you have to create it yourself. Like, even if you're in a completely non-traditional industry, that doesn't mean, and there's no one externally imposing regulations on you that tell you exactly what best practice is. But working out for yourself, what is my vision of best practice for this industry, and how can I create that? Being open to feedback and customer complaints and not being afraid of them. Thanking your customers, constantly inviting people to tell you if they're not happy, because the ones who tell you that they're not happy are the ones who are the greatest blessing for your business. They really open up the ability for you to work out where your boundaries are perhaps messy, and where you need to really focus some of your energy into bringing things back into alignment. Both an alignment with yourself, but also alignment with your clients, because your clients are a strong part of the vision for your business. If you're getting lots of unhappy clients, then maybe your vision is not in alignment with the clients you're calling in, and maybe you need to adjust your niche or whatever else. But yeah,
awesome. I love it. I think some of those things start to feel a little bit scary in terms of the regulations and the rules. And I remember from years ago when I was going into remedial massage therapy for myself, and just learning about council regulations if you were doing it from your home, and that you weren't allowed to play music unless you had a license for it, and that sort of thing. Like, there were just so many things that were overwhelming. But hearing about them, I kind of remember who told us. I guess one of the instructors, or maybe we had a specialist come in and talk about it. But understanding, like, what am I going to do about this, and how do I feel about this, and how am I going to make sure. And obviously in the last few years, that's one of the industries that has been really cut down and tried to get some regulation in there, because there wasn't anything. So as you said, even if you're in a business, which a lot of us are, which aren't regulated, and there's plenty of cowboys out there who do the wrong thing and do frighten people off and do make it scary for the rest of us who are trying to do the right thing. But there's obviously lots of different boundaries that we kind of need to at least understand that need to exist, even if we're not sure exactly what our boundaries are to start with, right?
Yeah. And just being curious and being open and activating that inner observer and just sort of noticing. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And people tell me that the biggest thing people tell me when I ask them how I can help them is that they say they don't know what they don't know. And that's very much the case in terms of regulation. But the thing is, when you actually sit down and start exploring, in most cases, you'd be surprised at what you do know.
Yeah, right.
And even if it's stuff that you're suppressing, or it's on your should list, or your important but not urgent list, and you're shoving it down into your subconscious all of the time, it's actually there. And that's that's what I'm working on this quarter with Castle Quest, is that whole, let's get that out and let's look at it. And let's actually investigate this environment that we're operating in, and step back and actually look at the forest, not just the trees that are clamoring for our attention all the time, but have a look at the forest that our business is operating in, and all of the things that impact on us. We've got the internet. The internet is full of information these days, particularly if you're intelligent enough to be able to burrow down to a reliable source, and to trace things back to find
where it actually
the authentic information. Or if not, then to ask for help. Ask mentors, ask experts, ask people who know the answer. Investigate, but rather than just putting on your blinkers and saying, okay, all I need to do is bring in the clients, get the money in my bank account, and that's it. There's actually it's so important to take that 360 view and say, okay, there's a black spot back there and it's a bit of a black hole, and my subconscious says that that black hole could actually suck my entire business into it and disappear. But actually turning and facing it and saying, okay, well, what is there, and filling in that information so that you can start thinking about how you can take action to mitigate that and make it safer. That's really so important.
Yeah.
And it could be things like, you need to put contracts or legal documents in place, or you need to put insurance in place, or you need to understand more about the regulatory environment that you're operating in. Or it could be things like you need to bring in more support, or you need to get your content batched up. It's not just legal. There are all sorts of aspects to it.
Yeah, there is. And everywhere you look, there's someone saying, your business is not working, this is what you need. Your business is not working, here's the missing thing. Like, everyone's got an opinion on what the missing piece is, and it's so easy to get blindsided and shiny objected by that sort of thing and just start collecting and consuming and work yourself into such a big old mess that it's never going to happen anyway. And, I think one thing that I think is really important to point out is that once you've established what the black hole is, it doesn't mean that you have to go and fix it. There's so many other ways of either DIYing it or outsourcing it or everything in between. Like, you don't have to necessarily fix all the plug all the holes yourself, but you need to know what the holes are in order to be able to get them plugged.
At least get started and just admit that it's there.
Yes.
Because when you're not admitting it's there, then that's when the subconscious brings in the sabotage to try and protect you from it.
100%.
Until you turn and face it, you're going to keep holding yourself back and keeping yourself small so it doesn't suck you in. But once you turn and face it, then you can start, it's in your awareness and it's much easier to deal with. And the other thing to say is that in all of this, trusting your intuition is essential. In most cases, when people come to me and say, oh, I've got this problem with a client, she wants to take me to court or whatever else, in 100% of cases they'll tell me, I knew she was going to be a problem from the first time she booked an interview. I was like, you knew, listen to yourself. You know how to keep yourself safe.
Boundaries. Say no. Yeah, exactly. You and I have had the same conversation. Like, I knew there was something weird going on here, and I knew she was not quite right. And the first time that I ever said no to a client, I was like petrified. And it was someone who I previously had thought, oh my gosh, I would love to work with that person. She's absolutely amazing. I found her really inspirational. And then we had a chat, and I was like, I don't think it's going to work out. Like, I could have done some stuff, but it wouldn't have been any more special than she was already doing. And I knew she'd know that and she'd hate it. And I was like, and I had to say no. And I went and sat on the couch for about 15 minutes afterwards, just going, I'm such an idiot. I'm never going to work in this town again. I've just said no to someone who I'd love to work with. Anyway, we've ended up working together years down the track on something else that was bigger and shinier and amazing. But the first time was really scary. And then after that, it was like, oh, well, she doesn't hate me. No one hates me. I still work in this town, and it's totally fine.
And the other thing is that if you struggle to articulate your boundaries, you can automate them. So, for example, I have trouble. There was a stage when I first started this business where I had trouble saying no to people who wanted legal advice or legal services that were outside where I was comfortable dealing, like sort of the big city suit type lawyer stuff or the litigation stuff. Once I put up my fairyland backdrop, I stopped having to have those conversations because people would get on a call with me and they would instantly see, this is not the lawyer for me, and they would say goodbye. And I would say, bonus, there goes my boundary. Whereas all the clients that I love and who I want to work with and who I absolutely adore, they come in, they see my backdrop, and they're like, yes, where have you been all my life? I feel so relaxed, I feel so comfortable. So it's not all about you having to maintain your boundaries 100% all the time.
Yeah.
It's about looking for all the different ways you can build those boundaries. And once you're internally aligned with them, it's so much easier. You build them into every aspect of your marketing, every post you do, every interaction you have with your clients, every part of your business. Mm-hmm. Those boundaries become built into it and integrated so that they're not a hassle or something hard to enforce and something that's hard work. They're just they become a part of who you are.
So, Michelle, this is a really interesting part of the conversation because I feel like we're kind of
bridging into the magnetism thing. And when you know who you are and you're happy to be there and you're not making any apologies and you're showing up and all that sort of thing, you do automatically magnetize the right people to you, and also detract. What's that word? What's the opposite to magnetize? What that one is?
Away. Push away. Repel.
Push away. Let them go. That sort of repel there. That's what it is. And I think that's a really interesting thing. So I was a bit the same, where I came from corporate. You don't swear, you wear nice clothes and you do makeup and all that sort of thing. But I used to say to people, I swear so much. I'm such a swearer. And I know it's an awful habit, but also that's how I talk. And I don't want to rock up online or in my emails or on my podcast and not swear, and then start working with someone and they realize, oh my gosh, you swear so much and that's really offensive to me. So I've listed my podcast, for example, as explicit, because I want to be able to swear on my own bloody podcast. Yeah. And I don't want it to, and it's scary though a little bit, because then I think, sometimes I do probably swear a little bit too much. I'm completely aware of that. But there's like people who don't like that just won't work with me, because there's no shiny bit on the outside where there's no swearing, and then they get in and there is. They just know, if you're going to work with me, I'm probably going to swear a little bit. Yeah. So it's kind of merging those two things in, where if that's how you're going to rock up and you do your Facebook Lives while you're walking the dog and there's kids' noises in the background, that's what you're going to get. And if you do it the other way because you are very polished, well, that's what you're going to get as well. So exactly. It kind of helps you to show up, and it makes it a shitload easier for yourself, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You don't
and it ties into all your consumer law obligations, because there's your truth in advertising.
Ah, there you go. Boundaries and legals.
You're not misrepresenting yourself. Yeah. And I mean, another fascinating aspect of that I'm exploring at the moment is the whole concept of Ho'oponopono, and how we are 100% responsible for everything that steps into our field of vision.
Yep.
So in Ho'oponopono, they say that that therapists, that they are responsible for creating it. It's like with every problem their clients have, the one constant is that the therapist is there. Mm. And so that's stepping up and taking responsibility for who you are, and actually opening yourself up to that connection, and not feeling that it's being done to you, or that your clients are separate from you, but feeling that relationship with them is fascinating too.
Mm. Very interesting, especially when it comes to the therapy and the interactions and advice giving and counselling and all of that sort of thing, because and coaching, and it all kind of comes in, to having to. I mean, you're there and you are liable for a lot of stuff just by being there, right? So, there's no point in trying to bullshit through that sort of thing.
Yeah. Mm. But I mean, even for lawyers, like when there's I'm in a number of lawyer groups, and the ones who are saying about how the vicarious trauma and the number of conflicts they get, and conflicts, and the more I try and practice embodying peace within myself and all of that sort of thing, I don't get conflict clients anymore. And when I do, I ho'oponopono and pray and do all the other energetic stuff in the background, and suddenly the knots untangle. It just kind of happens because it's all integrated and connected. And it's having the bravery to allow your boundaries to encompass every aspect of who you are. Because in the past, my boundaries would have said that my spiritual side needs to be locked away from my professional side, and that there could be no interaction between them. But the more I allow my boundaries to be holistic and to actually integrate everything of who I am, the more embodied and grounded and protective they become of me. So boundaries are not just something you should have or must do. They are essential to your happiness and your life of service.
Fun and easy. It's all I'm talking about. And it is the only way really to do the fun and easy thing is to
be you and to do you.
And to be unapologetically you. Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it. Tell me super quickly, just to wrap us up.
Yep.
what sort of things, as recovering perfectionists, can we kind of get started on? Like, what's the easy version of the boundary setting and the legal protecting stuff that isn't going to sit on our to-do list for 10 months? Hashtag Claire. And it's going to stop us in our tracks, but is also going to be inspiring and the easy way of kind of getting started with some of these sort of things.
The most common thing I tell people to do is and this may seem strange, but is their website terms and conditions. Mm-hmm. In my website terms and conditions DIY pack, I've actually gone further than most website terms and conditions do. I've made them that sort of investigation into boundaries. Spelling out who your ideal client is, who you're not meant to serve, what your services are, where the scope is, where your disclaimer is that sets the boundaries between this is my responsibility and what my duty of care lies, and this is where you need to take responsibility for yourself and who you are and the decisions, the informed choices that you make. Looking at things like your intellectual property, your refund policies, your payment policies, your cancellation policies, all of those very basic policies that are the smooth running of your business, your confidentiality and all of that sort of thing. And then really feeling into where you are in the business in terms of comfort level. I've got too much to share there that would go way over where we want to go, but just not feeling that you have to do it all. So I have clients who have been out there in business for 30 years or more with no legals. They're out there flying naked and they're perfectly comfortable with that. And I've got clients who aren't comfortable unless they have a suit of armor and a tank around them. Yeah. And that's both okay. But the thing to remember is that that's a continuum, and that as your business grows and changes, you're going to move back and forth on that continuum. And so that as the price of your products rise, as the length of time that people are working with you, as the level of risk involved rises, you're going to be moving on that continuum. And the more you are towards not feeling safe, the more important it is to pay attention to those boundaries, to seek advice, to get the contracts or whatever in place that will help you to feel protected.
Yes, I completely love it. And I think, you've made it really easy to understand that, everyone sits in different places on all sorts of risk spectrums, whatever you call them. Yeah. And it changes all the time. And sometimes it'll be because you heard that someone else had some issues and then it freaks you out. So you want to go and, back yourself. And sometimes you realize how much you've paid in business insurance that you've never really had to even whatever. And you go, I don't need that anymore. And it's okay to do that. And I think, like you said at the beginning, having some sort of dynamic, giving yourself permission to kind of make a decision now, but revisit it on a regular basis, if not on a case-by-case thing, to say, is it still serving me? Is it still serving them? Is it still working? Is it still aligned? Can I still impose this externally? All of that sort of thing. Like, it's not like you have to make a decision now and it's set in concrete for the rest of your life sort of thing. Yeah. Awesome.
Just like you'd have team meetings with the people that you're outsourcing work to, just like you have content creation meetings where you're batching your content, you also need to have check-in with my boundaries type meetings with yourself.
CEO time.
Yeah. And come up with your own definition of CEO.
Yeah.
We've been playing that game recently and it's a lot of fun.
There's some really good ones out there. What's yours?
Mine changes. I've got lots of them. Creative Enlightenment Optimizer is a good one.
I like it. I want one too. I'll have a think about that one.
Yeah. I've got lots of them now. I'm collecting them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle. I've loved working with you over the last couple of years. I know everyone who has worked with you, everyone who I know who's worked with you has absolutely loved it. You get shouted out more than anyone else in all the Facebook groups and online. Every time someone asks anything remotely to do with risk or legal or boundaries, your name comes up in conversation or gets tagged. So well done. You're obviously absolutely making some really beautiful and heart-centered waves in that space. And thank you so much for coming on The Recovering Perfectionist. I love that we didn't just talk legals today, and boundaries are certainly a really beautiful place to kind of start that doesn't feel too scary and hopefully helps, and like you said, has this beautiful sort of far-reaching impact throughout our entire lives, and all those parts that make us and our business, us and our business. So
thank you so much for having me. It's been such a delight to talk to you today.
Awesome chatting with you. And we'll put all of your links obviously in show notes. You have got your beautiful DIY packs, which I can 1,000,000% vouch for. The process of actually going through them was just fantastic, just to answer the questions and go, oh, I've never even thought about that, and now I know what my answer is. Was awesome. The bespoke work that you do is awesome. The courses, all the training and that sort of thing is always absolutely easy to understand, and all that sort of thing. So if you're listening, please go and check out Michelle and give her some love and ask her some questions and get in her world, because she's pretty awesome. And I'll talk to you real soon.
Wonderful. I always love our conversations.
Thanks, Michelle. See you.
Bye.